Welcome to the second episode of our ESG and Sustainability Unpacked podcast. We're excited to have you all here for the final part of our two-part post-COP28 series, in which we examine outcomes from the 28th United Nations Conference of Parties on Climate Change. I am your host, Marilyn Obasa-Osula, and I head the ESG, Sustainability and Climate Change Practice at PwC in Nigeria. On our last episode, we focused on how the outcomes of COP28 will impact the African business landscape. We also dive into the recently completed 54th World Economic Forum in Davos, where world leaders gather to discuss matters that's important to our world. At the center of that conversation was also commitment to climate actions. Part of this is to rebuild trust through transparent reporting, create partnership to advance solutions that will help us face our climate change challenges as we emerge in this 21st century. A consensus was reached. Tackling climate change and building new energy system is urgently needed. And we all know that the environmental, social, and governance discussions are largely being discussed and integrated into all professions, sectors, and the strategies of both public and private organizations. All this, again, largely driven by climate change and climate action. Today, we focus our length a bit more on Nigeria, and further down into this context of our discussion today is that we'll be focusing on a few steps Nigeria has taken. Maybe I'll just mention two to set the context, and these two steps are: one, that we have pioneered the early adoption of IFRS S1 and S2 standards that was put together by the International Sustainability Standard Board, known as ISSB. And these standards would guide sustainability reporting for investors. This is laudable, and Nigeria has decided to pioneer this for Africa. Also, Nigeria has taken steps to set up the blueprint for a $2.5 billion USD carbon market. I'm really happy and excited about this. And as a committee that has been put together to drive this, and this is driven not just by ideas, no, it's driven by the Nigerian Climate Change Act. So you will agree with me again that when you go for an event, going back to COP28, there are a lot of discussions happening and people, meeting and networking. But the real impact of this event is what happens afterwards. How seriously do people take this event? I've just discussed a few steps Nigeria has taken, and now we're going to trickle down more into how we should be looking at all this discussion. What are the impacts? What are the effects? That's why in PwC we decided that we'll do a two-part series. Although the second part is coming months after the COP28, we think it'll be a good time to look at the things that have been discussed and how countries and organizations are taking things forward. And with this, we are putting our discussion into three focus: finance, you understand with me, that's very important; technology, with data we can progress; and energy, which is very important to the African landscape and Nigeria at large. So with me, we have put together seasoned professionals today, and I have three of them discussing with me today. Please sit tight, take your cup of water, whatever you like to take to listen to this podcast, because it will help you if you're whatever level of management you are in or whatever sector you are in, to begin to think through climate change action and how this impacts on your business model or your operating model, or how you can mainstream this both in sub-national and national levels of your, depending on where you play a part. Now, we know that, like I said before, finance, technology, energy. So I'm going to welcome my guests, my speakers now. First on the list for the finance part is Omobolanle Adekoya. She's the partner and head of the Capital Market Accounting Advisory and Corporate Reporting Services for PwC in Nigeria. Also on this podcast with me is Olufemi Osinubi, who is a partner and head of Technology Consulting and the Advisory Leader at PwC Nigeria. And on the call with me, the third speaker is our Honorable Dr. Godwill Ihetu, who is the former GED of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited. He's also the former Managing Director of the Nigerian LLNG, established to harness Nigeria's vast natural gas resource and produce liquefied natural gas LNG and natural gas liquids NGL for export. So you agree with me, we have seasoned professionals, and please stay tuned like I said, get your cup of water, get your cup of coffee or whatever it's time you're listening to this podcast, and take your time to assimilate, agree, comment, ask questions, as your questions will help us to incorporate certain discussion elements in our subsequent podcast. Thank you all for joining. And then I start with Omobolanle. Thank you so much, Bolanle, one more time for joining this call. And we look forward to, learning from you, on the emerging issues on finance and climate and sustainability. The COP28 has come and gone, and there were a lot of discussion that happened there. In your view, what are the implications of these discussions? How do you advise us as a nation and as corporates? Thank you. Over to you, Bolanle.
Thank you, Marilyn, and I'm glad to be here. You would have had quite a few similar themes that came up from the COP28, as well as the recently concluded 2024 World Economic Forum in Davos, with key takeaways like rebuilding trust, building a new growth model in a certain time, looking at things like global cooperation, the use of technology to be able to deal with the data that we need, like artificial intelligence. But the truth about it, to be able to move the needle in climate change, that gap, the gap between making it a reality and those opportunities, it is finance. And that's why the financial institutions have to play a very key and central role in this, and being able to balance their returns versus what is needed to be able to save the environment. So there are three key activities I'll say that's required to make this happen. The first one is understanding, the second one is collaboration, and the third one is scaling up. So let's talk about understanding. When we're talking about understanding, a lot of FIs have challenges in looking around measuring and monitoring emissions. So if you look at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, what it means for them, and even when it comes to things like climate-related lending, to be able to know how to price products, price insurance products, make the right investment, being able to balance and align their portfolios. Actually, in Nigeria, because we don't have the sophistication, a lot of data is needed to be able to understand the potential return. They must also understand the fact that it's a long game. Some of the challenges they even have with agri, we haven't even scaled that yet, talk less of climate change, but it's something that needs to happen. In addition, with understanding, FI should also capitalize on noteworthy initiatives introduced in COP28, things like the net zero data public utility, the world's first, and it will help to be able to bridge that gap between what's happening with private sector climate transition. And when you think about the transitioning from fossil fuels, which we're quite dependent on locally, to renewable energy, hydro, gas, Nigeria, we have a lot of gas. Yet, how do you then balance the need for revenue versus our energy needs? Because we do have a lot of energy needs that we haven't met yet. FIs also need to understand that funding is required for the research and development, the R&D that we need innovation for projects, because without it, we can't move the needle. The next one is around collaboration. So what is collaboration? Collaboration will help to build the trust that we talk about amongst governments, policymakers, private sector versus public sector. There are quite a few stakeholders. People talk about decarbonization, but how then do we make this happen? How can we come together? Because we will need special products to be able to reduce credit risk that may be expected, creating funds to help with long-term initiatives, maybe help even with government incentives, being able to consult on it in that sense, look at the priorities that's required, workable solutions. There are quite a number of things that were talked about at COP28 around the Industrial Transition Accelerator, things around the Global Decarbonization Accelerator. These are things that we as a nation can do and collaborate together so that we are actually accountable to making sure we don't pass that 1.5 degree goal that we always hear about in that sense. And even looking at regulatory interventions that may be required to be able to charter the growth that's needed. And then the last area is about scaling up. We need to scale up. For it to make sense, we need to scale up. So it might mean coming together, coming up with things like the bonds, collective investment scheme to help with climate finance. So many developments that's happening. Then how do you look at infrastructure that's needed as well to help with commodity, because it will have ripple effects. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the news about food shortages that we have in Nigeria, but we must move that needle, and the FI is very key in there. Above all of this, we also need to be able to report. We need our people to report. The DFIs, developing institutions are also held there to help. We can also learn from other countries, what's happening in Scandinavia, Indonesia, all of these things. But we must be able to report and be transparent. So when you look at the ISSB, IFRS S1 and S2 standards that are there, we must look at it as baseline. So looking at things that, and for us to be able to report appropriately, there must be data available, data governance, and, as I mentioned earlier on, technology. So I'm happy that Femi is here to talk about technology, because technology will be there to sort of help us as well. Thank you, Marilyn.
All right. Thank you so much, Bolanle, for taking us through the finance aspect of things. Like I said at the beginning, we were going to go through the post-COP28 and the 54th World Economic Forum at Davos conversation, looking at it in three lenses: the finance, technology, and energy for the Nigerian landscape. And thank you for also mentioning, the technology being, the key things that investors will be looking at, especially as technology helps to scale up innovation. And with us today is no other but our, the partner and head of our tech consulting and advisory head, who has very deep experience in technology and in emerging issues as well. Femi, thank you for coming to this podcast. I just have a few questions for you. What are your thoughts on integration of technology across various sectors? And how do you see this playing out post-COP28 and the discussion in Davos? And how do you relate this to the Nigerian landscape, helping businesses know how to align their sustainability ambitions with technology? Thank you. Over to you, Femi.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thanks for bringing me into this podcast session, and thanks for Bolanle for starting the discussion around technology. I strongly believe that emerging tech has got a role to play in our lives, especially during this difficult times globally, climate change and a couple of things. But I was, just focusing on COP28, which, we witnessed several technology initiatives aimed at accelerating climate action. And I'll mention a few of these initiatives. The first is actually the Utilities for Zero, what we call the Utilities for Zero Alliance, led by the high-level champions. This initiative actually brought together about 31 partners, including global utilities and power companies, to advance electrification, renewables ready grids, and clean energy deployments, and aligning with the 2030 breakthrough goals. And there was actually an action plan declared by the global power utilities to drive energy transition at COP28. Another one is actually the AI is really at the forefront of everything. Maybe it's a coincidence. I'm actually speaking tomorrow at an AI in Nigeria event. So AI is so key. I had a session with Microsoft about 3 weeks ago where we actually engage on AI. So there is really anything that we're doing now that AI is not really a very important topic that we need to discuss. So again, at COP28, there was an AI Innovation Grant Challenge launched by the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee and Enterprise Neurosystem. And the initiative was actually to identify and support the development of AI-powered solutions for climate change in developing countries. The focus, again, is on areas like disaster risk reduction, sustainable agriculture, and climate resilient infrastructure. Again, the challenge launched at COP28 was to harness AI for climate action in developing countries. And I think even if you look at the situation we are in Nigeria today, and a lot of countries in Africa, and even globally, where there is high inflation, challenges around food insecurity, AI is, there's nothing, AI has got a big role to play to reduce all these issues around agriculture, or to enable our sustainable agriculture. One thing I will mention again is around the technology and innovation hub, amongst other things. There was a space dedicated at COP28 showcasing cutting edge climate technologies, and where they brought innovators, investors, and policymakers together. And that all actually hosted panel discussions, workshops, and demonstrations on various technology solutions. Again, so there's so much around technology which we actually, which were really discussed and witnessed at COP28. COP28 actually emphasized the need for sector-specific technology developments around agriculture, industry. You look at the industry technologies for improving energy efficiency, reducing industrial emissions, and circular economy approaches. Again, transportation, you see the electric vehicles, green shipping, sustainable aviation. So lots of things around sustainable development, sustainable agriculture. Various sectors were actually emphasized at COP28. But let's look at some of the implications briefly. One is actually around some of the actions that will be accelerated and which I will call accelerated action. Technology was recognized as a crucial driver for speeding up the pace of climate action across all sectors. Initiatives like the AI Innovation Grant Challenge, which I mentioned earlier, and the Youth Synthesis for Zero Allowance, aiming to develop and deploy. They aim to develop and deploy solutions for renewables, emissions reduction, and climate resilience, pushing countries closer to meeting the Paris Agreement goals. Another one is the enhanced adaptation, which is actually around technology advancements in early warning systems, climate resilient infrastructure, and innovative food and water management solutions. So there are lots of solutions being deployed, focused on climate change, focused on sustainability. Again, using technology to improve efficiency and effectiveness. So technologies like AI, I mentioned, Omobolanle has mentioned it, almost every conversation now is around AI. So technologies around AI, like AI can optimize energy management, reduce waste, and increase the efficiency of climate interventions. So this translates to better utilization of resources and potentially lower costs associated with achieving climate goals. Another way to look at it is around the new market opportunities that climate change would actually create. So the growing focus on clean energies opens up substantial opportunities for businesses and entrepreneurs. Developing, manufacturing, and implementing these solutions can actually drive economic growth and create new jobs, particularly in renewable energy, green construction, and sustainability, and sustainable transportation sectors. What are the opportunities for Nigeria? I'm conscious of time. A couple of opportunities in Nigeria or for Nigeria, investments and jobs. Nigeria stands to benefit from increased global investments in clean technologies. There can be a lot of research and development within the country, creating new jobs in sectors like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and climate resilience. Market assessments as well. Enhanced climate resilience. Technology can also improve Nigeria's resilience to climate change. Impacts like droughts, floods, and rising sea levels. Even this week in February, it's very unusual in Nigeria where you see heavy rain and flood. That's as a result of climate change, and we can actually use technology to detect, to really detect early warning signs and actually prepare for all these floods that are bound to happen in this day and age. And the final thing I would say on that is actually improved energy access. Clean technology advancements in renewables and energy storage can also address Nigeria's energy access challenges, providing reliable and affordable power to rural communities and reducing dispensable or dependence on fossil fuels. I'm going to stop there. Thanks, Marilyn. I think I will pause there at the moment too.
Thank you so much, Femi, for all that insight you provided on technology and how this is, how technology is helping us deal with climate change and how the risks and opportunities are emerging in that space. It's a good one, but moving from finance to technology and now to energy, I think we want to know how the energy sector should be looking at this. And not, we have someone with us who has been in the whole journey, in quite a good number of time of the journey for the energy sector in our country, Nigeria. And Doc, over to you. Just a lot about technology, but how do you see technology, the risk and opportunities? What are your advice? What would you advise businesses? What would you advise government, in this just energy transition that is inevitable? Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you. I can see huge opportunities in the energy transition or transition to clean energy. Well, the oil and gas sector is a major contributor to climate change. And the industry has taken it, has accepted it after so many years of denial. And right now, the industry is trying to decarbonize. And decarbonization is a very wide field, and that industry is doing a number of things in this respect. But I think the one that everybody hears about these days is carbon capture technologies, where oil and gas companies are making a lot of investments in technologies that will remove carbon from their operations. We don't have time to go into all the details of that, but what we know is that the oil and gas companies are taking this seriously. Although some commentators feel that they're not doing enough, that they are carrying on as business as usual, because oil and gas production has not yet diminished. They are still investing, but the point here is that there are technologies that are being applied to reduce emissions. In Nigeria, for example, at the last COP28, we declared that we are going to eliminate flaring, gas flaring, which of course emits a lot of CO2 into the environment. And I think it's good to know that just recently, Total in Nigeria has announced that they've been able to remove all flaring in their onshore facilities, which is a major achievement. And it will take quite an effort to be able to do that throughout the oil industry in Nigeria. The risks here, the opportunities are there even for the oil and gas companies in the renewable sector. And some of them are already investing in that sector: solar, wind, hybrid, clean energy sources. And the advice to organizations is that they should take climate change seriously. For ESG, climate change issues are important, and they should begin to see how they can collaborate and be able to appreciate the issues of sustainability in their business, because climate change impacts every sector in the current state of the planet. Planet is going electricity in order to have clean energy. It's all about going to electricity generation. And that is how we can ensure that we have, clean energy, and that we're able to adhere to the zero carbon, zero emission targets of 2050 or 2060. Governments have to take this seriously, have to take the issue of climate change seriously. And how do they do that? I think it's back to the financial institutions. Government should be able to stimulate action among the financial institutions, identify where funding is required, because renewable energy will need funding. Renewable energy has not really started to make profit to be able to, fund, expand its own facilities and make profit and invest, unlike the fossil fuel sector, where there's already they're making good profit and they're able to expand their operations without necessarily looking for financing elsewhere. But for renewable energy, a lot of money is required, and governments have to look for collaboration. In Nigeria, we know the government is there are European Union countries that have provided funding or have promised funding. And of course, there's our own BOI also that's involved. So government should be able to promote or to support all these initiatives, even if they are not putting in money in them, but be able to stimulate investments in these areas. Nigeria in particular, where we have an energy transition plan, which ties into electricity and other renewable sources. I think that plan needs to be followed up very, very seriously. There's a tendency that in Nigeria we make a plan and then it becomes just a document left somewhere. But I think this is very important. The way things are going, we're all feeling the heat. Even this week, we know that climate change is no longer something that to be debated about. It is real and it is here with us. Technology is important. Investments are important. Governments are important. Collaboration is very important. It's not something that can be left to one sector. And of course, financial institutions and people like PwC have challenges, have opportunities to pick up work in this area.
Thank you, Doctor. You have, spoken a lot. You've spoken through even, some of the things that Bolanle had spoken about in finance. You also spoken through some of the things that Femi had spoken in terms of technology and how together. And you also spoken, to the sector you're very familiar with, which is the energy sector, which is actually driving most of the narrative around the climate change. One key thing, we have a lot of competition, for energy supply, because we would have hydrogen, we'll have the likes of solar, we'll have the likes of wind, so many competition. So I see the price falling in the next few years. What are you about that? And I think this is something that businesses should begin to look at to diversify their portfolio, even governments diversify their portfolios as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. My thoughts are very simple. Today, what the world needs is energy security. Energy security is key. How do you ensure energy security? At the moment, the world is relying on fossil fuels, a lot of renewables coming in. But the challenge is, how do we ensure that renewables are going to be able to fill the space that the fossil fuel industry is going to drop, if you like. As renewables go up, how do we make sure that the world has enough energy, that the renewables should be able to cope with the gaps that will be created by the reduction of the oil?
Thank you, Doctor. I'm going to take that as your final thoughts. You've elaborated as much as possible within the time that we have for this. There's no stopping there's a lot to discuss about this topic, but just to have this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for your conversations and everything that the input, the insights from, your various perspectives, as to see that ESG actually translates into all professions, all job descriptions is growing. I dare call it an octopus. So, Bolanle, I need to ask you, what are your final thoughts to organizations in Nigeria and to public sector players as well? What are your final thoughts?
So there are a few things I want to say. The first one is that it's everybody's responsibility. A lot of times when we're speaking to FIs and other stakeholders, everyone blames the other, or everyone is sort of busy looking at how to look good. But the fact is that we need to be able to grow sustainable businesses. Business strategy and sustainable strategy. And climate is one of it, because a lot of us don't realize that there's actually a ripple effect in there. So it's everyone's responsibility, and people need to go all in to make it work And finance, as I said, with capital, is very difficult to do things. And you can work together, work together. And, everyone has something that everyone needs to be able to come together and collaborate and actually make the transition as required for the sake of our environment. Thank you.
I really like the fact that you talked about the ripple effect, that it's massive. I wish we had time to run through even just one ripple effect across one sector. And I think it really makes sense. But I think with the energy sector, that's very key. All right. Femi, thank you once again. But I would like to ask you, what are your thoughts? They've just released the recent IFRS, ISSB S1 and S2, and people are panicking. What do you think technology can do to support this move in terms of reporting and data and all that? And with this, we would like you to use this as your final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, and Bolanle as well. And I think this is an area that Bolanle is so passionate about, and yourself, around what's happening in that space. I believe technology can really enable or be used to build trust in investors, and in one way, by improving on data management for reporting. The nature of sustainability reporting, being non-financial, puts a veil on the transparency of sustainability reporting with investors. So this veil has been tackled with the launch of IFRS, ISSB S1 and S2. However, it requires data management and automation to drive the value. This means that ESG-related data are captured in enterprise systems such as ERPs, CRMs, and any other system to ensure compliance with the ISSB 1 and S2. And I'm aware that in a lot of the global OEMs, like the Oracles and the Microsofts and SAP, and even including IFS, are working to integrate into sustainability into their solution. So it enables easier reporting and automation going forward. Thank you, Marilyn.
All right, thank you for that closing remark. Yes. Now we've come to the end of our 2-part post-COP28 series, and we look forward to you joining us at our monthly Fire Chats podcast, where we will be discussing different topics around ESG risk assessment, carbon emissions, carbon credit eligibility. Well, we're talking about tax transparency reporting, talking about carbon tax, talking about initiatives, tax initiatives around going green. Well, we'll be talking about solar energy, we're talking about energy in general, talking about audits, ESG audit and assessment. We're talking about governance, breaking ESG into E, the S, and the G. Like I always say, like technology, ESG is going to be like technology. It's going to be an enabler. Just like technology is an enabler of innovation that's making our work easier, ESG is also an enabler that will make our businesses sustainable, that will make our lives easier, and that will make our world a better place for us now and for the future generation. We would like you to send your questions to us at the link below. Send your comments, your questions, and we'll definitely address them. Bye.